Brigadier General Matthew Braman for his testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, Chairman Cruz, and Ranking Member Cantwell, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come here before you today to speak about the mid-air collision that occurred between an Army Black Hawk helicopter with the call sign PAT-25 and American Airlines Flight 5342. First and foremost, on behalf of Army senior leaders and all of our soldiers, I want to pass my continued condolences to all those that are affected by this tragedy. I want to thank the professional work of our first responders and the federal, state, and local agencies that responded within minutes to the crash site and aided in the recovery. I want to thank Chairman Hamady and the NTSB for conducting a thorough investigation, facilitating a close and transparent relationship with the Army as we conduct our parallel investigations. The NTSB remains lead in the investigation, so I can't offer facts and recommendations at this time, but I can offer an Army perspective on the preliminary report and provide clarifying information on Army helicopter operations, and certainly can do that here in the Washington, D.C. area. For context, PAT-25's unit, the 12th Aviation Battalion, falls under the Army Aviation Brigade, or referred to as the TAB. And that unit has the mission to provide continuous, responsive aviation support to senior military and government leaders to enable continuity of government operations and defense support to civil authorities. The TAB is one of dozens of organizations, both civilian and military, that operates helicopters in the D.C. area. Our aircraft continue to meet all requirements to operate in the national airspace, in Class B airspace, and the helicopter routes in Washington, D.C., and they operate under positive control of flight services when within 30 nautical miles of DCA. PAT-25 was operating out of Davison Army Airfield at Fort Belvoir. The crew of 3 were fully qualified to fly in the local area. The pilot in command, CW2 Andrew Eaves, was an instructor pilot. The co-pilot, Captain Rebecca Lobach, was a qualified pilot in command as well, and the crew chief, Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara, was a standardization flight instructor. The night of 29 January, PAT-25 was conducting an annual proficiency and readiness test, or APART. And as part of that flight, was approved to operate at contingency locations associated with their directed mission. This has led to questions as to whether PAT-25 was transmitting automatic dependent surveillance broadcast out, or ADSB out. The specific status of both its operation and functionality is something that is under the investigation of the NTSB. The crew, however, was approved to operate with that capability off in accordance with Army policy. The aircraft transponder, however, was active with Mode 3 Alpha Charlie and Mode S when within the Class B airspace and was emitting all the required information to allow air traffic services and traffic collision avoidance systems to detect and track the aircraft. Army policy does not permit transponder off operations in the national airspace. They do not permit transponder off operations. There is certainly no shortage of speculation on potential causes of the accident. I understand well the desire for answers. As the Director of Army Aviation and a senior Army aviator, there is nothing more important to me than the capability, proficiency, and safety of our air crews and those whom they transport and support in defense of this nation. And I'm also personally invested in the safety of our commercial aviation enterprise, as I live with an airline pilot, and her safety and the safety of her passengers is paramount to me as well, which is why it is essential that we see this investigation through to its fruition so we can have well-informed, facts-based conclusions to make desired change when needed. But where prudent, the Army is not waiting to take action. Immediately after the accident, the 12th Aviation Battalion paused all operations. They've only recently resumed flights and only outside the 7 nautical mile radius of DCA, with the exception of flights directly supporting the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and that remains true today. The Army continues to fully comply with all FAA restrictions on helicopter traffic over the Potomac River near DCA. The Army is actively participating, along with other military services and agencies, with an FAA-led working group to redesign the Route 4 helicopter corridor as recommended by the NTSB in its preliminary report. We've also issued interim guidance to elevate the approval authority to operate ADSB off. The Army is fully committed to a transparent and collaborative review of the events of 29 January and of all operations in the vicinity of DCA. We support any and all efforts to ensure a tragedy such as this never occurs again. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee, and I look forward to answering your questions.